G'day guys, ZiggyD here. ZiggyD just released a short teaser trailer for the upcoming Earthquake skill from the Ascendancy expansion pack. This will be releasing with Ascendancy. Short teaser trailer and a post detailing some of the details on the skill. I thought I'd weigh in with some of my first impressions and analysis of what this skill looks like and how I think it'll perform. So let me just say first up that this skill looks and sounds awesome. Audio-visual design on point. You take a big weapon, slam the ground, kind of like an oomphy kind of shockwave into nearby enemies, and then after a short delay, a massive kind of like ground-shattering earthquake surges out in all directions, destroying everything. So pretty nice stuff there. And Rory was mentioning in a recent Q&A that he did with Hegemony and Wobbucha how important the visuals and sounds of skills are, and how many players rate the power of a skill based more on the visuals rather than its actual performance. Because, and you see this a lot, like something that's got a big impactful crunch to it that really blows up enemies, looks and feels much better to play. It makes the build more fun, and it makes the build, you know, appear stronger really when you're blowing up monsters, and this looks very strong because of that kind of visual design of it as well. So this skill to me looks like the next evolution of the design of Ice Crash. Now, there's obviously some similarities here. You slam the ground, then there's kind of like a surging out AoE. There's obviously some similarities with the design of Ice Crash, but what I'm talking about specifically was when they first released Ice Crash, ZiggyD mentioned that they were trying to create something that would veer away from the attack speed meta, that would kind of like take a bit of a different direction, and Ice Crash was intentionally made to not work with multi-strike for that reason, so that it would promote a bit of a different kind of like more impactful, slower hitting playstyle. Now, that kind of worked a little bit. Obviously, can't use multi-strike with it, but attack speed was still an excellent way to scale Ice Crash. Like, you didn't really have any reason to not get as much attack speed as possible. Obviously, it worked well with low attack speed, and not using multi-strike restricted you from getting some attack speed, but still worked very well with attack speed. So, didn't quite achieve, I think, exactly what they set out to achieve with it, but still a very cool skill. I think Ice Crash is a great skill. It's a lot of fun to play. It's maybe a bit over the top visually. I think this Earthquake skill is maybe a little better visually, not too over the top, whereas I thought Ice Crash was a bit over the top. If you've ever seen increased AoE or Ice Crash, then you know what I'm talking about. And this trend of attack speed and cast speed in Path of Exile has been kind of spiraling out of control over the past couple of years, really. Like, just over time, everything's become faster and faster. You know, it started off with things like blender builds, you know, cleave builds with tons and tons of attack speed, and it just progressed from there, right? Like, it was always good to get as much attack speed as possible, and it kind of sent the game towards animations, firstly, start looking pretty wonky once you start getting pretty fast attack speed. I remember a particular GIF that shows the crab legs effect that the duelist has when he has large amounts of attack speed. But it makes the game look wonky, and it also, I think, feels less impactful when you're kind of just like feel like you're waving a feather at the enemies as quickly as possible and they're dying. Some skills work out, it works out okay, things like Reave and that, but I think a lot of melee skills especially, I like to see things slow down a bit. I like to see a more satisfying rhythm to it, and you lose that rhythm once you've got, you know, 100 attacks per second. So I'm very excited to see another skill here that is attempting to kind of break away from that as much attack speed as possible meta. Now let's talk about how Earthquake does that. So firstly, the way this skill works is you slam the ground, and that creates kind of like a trigger point, essentially. And then after a short delay, an Earthquake will trigger. Now it is not possible to create another trigger point while there is one currently active. So essentially the way Rory has worded this is that the skill slams the ground, dealing damage and creating a fissure that explodes an aftershock after a short duration. So you can't actually create another fissure while one is currently active. Now this means that beyond a certain point, attack speed gives you very little actual benefit in terms of your actual damage output. Because if you slam down a fissure and then slam down another fissure while the first one is active, then nothing's actually going to happen. The skill is not going to function. You're not going to have another aftershock. You're still just going to have that one aftershock. So what this means is it creates a very rhythmic skill where you slam down a fissure and then you reposition, and then right when the explosion happens, when the actual earthquake triggers and that first fissure is removed, you can place another one. So you only need enough attack speed to be able to put down another fissure as soon as the first one expires. This means this skill's going to benefit a lot from having very slow, heavy-hitting weapons. Things like the Moroi Urki are going to be great for this. Increased AoE obviously going to be very nice, but a very slow weapon that hits very hard is going to be ideal. Now, it also means that you have another interesting option for scaling this skill as well. If you do want to start to incorporate a bit more attack speed into your build, maybe have the build feel a little smoother to play, have it be a bit quicker, a bit more reactive, then you can actually use less duration to shorten the duration of the fissure so that it explodes sooner, and that'll allow you to put down another one, which means that getting some attack speed may be beneficial depending on how you work out the math for your less duration, the duration of the fissure is down, and how much actual attack speed you have. Now, an important point to note that Rory teased in his post was that less duration is actually going to be getting a more damage modifier for duration-based skills as well, so less duration is probably going to be a very good choice for this. Now, it's quite likely though that even with less duration, there's still going to be a pretty good cap on how much attack speed is actually useful in terms of damage output. What's nice about this is that attack speed is still going to be useful even if you're at kind of your like maximum damage output as far as attack speed is concerned, because it still makes your character a little bit faster to play, right? Like you swing faster, you land that hit faster, and you're able to start moving again after swinging, so there is that less delay, you can be a little more mobile, you can leap slam around faster and things like that. But what this means is attack speed is not going to be the be-all end-all of your actual damage scaling. And we can just see from the video how kind of like a satisfying rhythm this is. And let's face it, one-shotting packs is very satisfying, and a build or a skill that supports that ideal is pretty exciting. Obviously, this sort of skill can have concerns with Reflect, something that hits very hard with a big single hit. We know from other skills like Rain of Arrows, especially if it's pure physical damage like this skill is likely to be, then they can have some problems with Reflect. A Reflect mob, certainly Reflect maps can be very concerning. With something like this, with enough damage, I think even just a single physical reflect rare could be concerning, so we may see some people using things like Fizz to Lightning conversions or something like that. The physical to Lightning support gem would be a nice safety buffer for this to help avoid some reflect deaths. So I really like the look of this skill. Looks like it's going to make really fun, impactful, brutal feeling builds to play. And I really like that ZiggyD has seemingly learned from their attempts with Ice Crash to steer away from attack speed, and basically like taken that idea of Ice Crash and taken it another step further, right? Implemented a mechanic that actually gives you a good reason to not get any more attack speed, rather than just saying you can't use one attack speed support gem. So on paper and from the footage we've seen so far, I really like the design of the skill. I think it's going to be a great addition to the game. Obviously, there's going to be a few things that we'll have to see before we can really say how good this is actually going to be. A few concerns could be, obviously, the actual damage output of it, any other modifiers it has, and then if it has kind of like any weird effects where, hopefully this isn't the case, but hopefully the actual earthquake isn't a secondary effect that is like separate to the actual hit, as in, like, sometimes you have skills where the secondary effect isn't actually affected by things like melee physical damage, etc. So hopefully that, you know, there's no kind of weirdnesses there with the secondary effect or anything like that that make this like very difficult to scale or awkward to build for. We have some skills like that recently added to the game, which, you know, raise some concerns, such as things like Wild Strike, which can be pretty awkward to build for with their secondary effects. But we'll see how this pans out. I think there's a pretty good likelihood that the secondary explosion will work fine with all of the main support gems you'd be using for the initial hit anyway, so hopefully there shouldn't be any actual issues there. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.